He had always loved the sound of music. Even when the house was quiet and the streets outside were filled with ordinary noises, he could hear melodies in his head. The boy would hum softly to himself, tapping his fingers on any surface he could find, imagining that he was playing a piano. But life had never given him the chance to touch one. His family did not have money for lessons, and the nearest music school was far away. Still, every day he dreamed. The academy was a tall, grand building with polished floors and shining windows. Inside, talented children and teenagers practiced tirelessly, their music echoing down the hallways. He had walked past it many times, feeling both awe and fear. The people inside looked so confident, so sure of themselves, and he felt like a shadow in comparison. They moved with purpose, their hands gliding over keyboards, their faces serious yet calm. He wanted to be one of them, but he feared he would never belong. One day, he gathered the courage to enter the academy. The grand doors seemed to loom over him as he stepped inside. The smell of polished wood and old paper filled the air. He felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, his stomach twisting in knots. He peeked into a room where a small recital was taking place. Students were playing one after another, their music smooth and precise. Some notes soared like birds in flight, while others fell gently, soft and careful. He watched silently, imagining his own fingers moving in the same way, and a bittersweet feeling washed over him. A few students noticed him standing by the door and gave a quick glance before returning to their own practice. The director of the academy, a tall man with sharp eyes, noticed him as well. He raised an eyebrow and walked over, his expression a mix of curiosity and impatience. "And who are you?" the director asked, his voice echoing in the hallway. I want to learn music," the boy replied softly, almost afraid his own voice would break. The director laughed, a short, sharp sound that made the boy shrink back. "Learn music? Here? You?" He shook his head, a smirk on his face. "You'll never perform, boy. You're not ready. You don't even belong here." The boy felt a sting in his chest. He had expected some difficulty, maybe some rejection, but not this open dismissal. His cheeks burned, and for a moment he felt like running away. He wanted to cry, but he held the tears back. Something inside him stirred, a small flame of determination he didn't know was there. Days passed, and the boy found himself drawn to the academy again and again. He would stand outside, listening to the music through the tall windows. Sometimes, he would hum along quietly, imagining his own fingers dancing on the keys. The director's words haunted him, but instead of giving up, they became a challenge in his mind. "I'll show them," he whispered to himself. "I will play and they will see." At home, he tried to find ways to practice. His room had no piano, only a small keyboard that had seen better days. He would press the keys slowly, learning which notes sounded right together. Sometimes he would get frustrated when he hit the wrong keys, but he never stopped. Every mistake was a lesson, every small success a spark of hope. He remembered a story his grandmother once told him about a young boy who had dreamed of singing for kings. He had no lessons, no money, no special talent at first, but he practiced every day until his voice became beautiful and strong. The boy kept this story in his heart, repeating it to himself whenever he felt doubt creeping in. One afternoon, he discovered a small, dusty piano in an unused room at the back of the academy. It was old, with chipped keys and a faded surface, but it sang when touched. He slipped in quietly, not wanting anyone to see him. He sat down, his fingers hovering over the keys. The sound that came out was awkward at first, a jumble of notes that didn't make sense. But he kept going, pressing each key carefully, listening, adjusting, trying again. Hours passed without him noticing, lost in the music he had always imagined but never been able to play. Sometimes the janitor would peek in, giving him a small nod of encouragement. No words were needed. The silent support meant more than anyone could know. Slowly, the boy began to feel that maybe, just maybe, he could learn. Maybe he could play in front of others, maybe he could perform. The thought made his heart pound, a mixture of fear and excitement. The academy halls continued to buzz with students, each one practicing with confidence. The boy knew he was still far from their level, but he reminded himself that everyone starts somewhere. He had a long road ahead, filled with mistakes and frustrations, but he also had something they could not take away, a love for music that came from deep inside. Night after night, he returned to the dusty piano, practicing quietly, learning the feel of the keys, the weight of the notes. He memorized small pieces, slowly building up his confidence. Each success, no matter how tiny, fueled his determination. The memory of the director's laughter still haunted him, but now it pushed him forward rather than holding him back. He began to imagine what it would be like to play in front of the academy. The fear that once made him tremble now became a fire, a desire to prove that his dreams were valid. He did not want revenge, only a chance to show that talent could grow in unexpected places, and that anyone, no matter how small or overlooked, could rise if they had courage. As the days turned into weeks, the boy's skills improved. He still stumbled occasionally, still made mistakes, but he learned to listen to the music, to feel it in his bones, and to let it guide his fingers. The academy, once a place of fear and rejection, now felt like a world of possibilities. He knew the director might never believe in him, but he also knew that music did not need permission. It only needed a willing heart. And so, every day, the boy practiced, dreamed, and imagined. He did not know what the future held, or when the moment would come when he could finally perform. But he felt ready, in a quiet, certain way, that when the time came, he would touch the piano, and the world would listen. The boy could not stop thinking about the dusty piano at the back of the academy. Every night, he went to sleep imagining his fingers gliding over the keys, feeling the music flow through him. He woke up early each morning, even before the sun had risen, with the same thought in his mind. He had to practice. He did not want anyone to see him yet. He was not ready for the world to hear what he could do. For now, it was a secret, a private space where only he and the music existed. At home, he tried to keep up his practice in small ways. The old keyboard in his room had missing keys and a sticky spacebar, but it was enough for him to warm up, to feel the notes, and to remember the songs he had heard at the academy. Sometimes he would sit on the floor, tapping his fingers on imaginary keys, and humming melodies he had never heard anyone else play. His family noticed his focus and curiosity but did not understand how much he loved the music. They could see it brought him joy, and that was enough for them. The academy was always busy. Students came and went, teachers moved from room to room, and the sound of music filled the halls. The boy had to be careful. He learned when the hallways were empty and when the janitor was cleaning nearby, providing him a chance to sneak into the back room. Each time he entered, he felt a wave of excitement mixed with nervousness. The piano was old and slightly out of tune, but that did not matter to him. Every note he played taught him something, every mistake was a lesson, and every small success gave him hope. In the beginning, his fingers were clumsy. He hit the wrong keys more often than not. Sometimes the notes came out harsh or uneven, and he would groan in frustration. But he did not give up. He would take a deep breath, start again, and focus on the sound he wanted to create. Over time, he learned how to hold his hands just right, how to press the keys gently, and how to make the music flow. He discovered that the piano was not just about pressing keys. It was about listening, feeling, and connecting with each note. The janitor noticed the boy's dedication. He was a quiet man who had seen many students come and go. He did not interfere, but he often watched from the doorway, nodding in encouragement. One day, after the boy had struggled for hours with a particularly difficult piece, the janitor spoke. "You have talent," he said quietly. "You just need to believe it yourself." The boy looked up, surprised. "Do you really think so?" The janitor smiled. "I do. Keep practicing. One day you will show them all." Those words stayed with him. He practiced longer and harder than ever, determined to prove to himself first that he could do it. He learned to memorize short pieces, to play scales without looking at his hands, and to control the timing of each note. Slowly, the music he produced began to sound like the melodies in his imagination. At school, the boy tried to hide his growing confidence. He still walked quietly through the hallways, listening to other students play, but he no longer felt invisible. He started to imagine himself on stage, fingers moving with ease, music flowing naturally from his hands. The fear of the director's laughter was still there, but it no longer held him back. Instead, it became a quiet challenge he wanted to overcome. One afternoon, he discovered a new piece of music left on the piano by a previous student. The sheet was worn with faded notes, but it seemed to call to him. He carefully studied it, trying to understand the rhythm, the melody, and the emotions hidden in each line. For hours, he practiced the piece, slowly bringing it to life. The notes were not perfect yet, but the music began to take shape, filling the room with sound. He closed his eyes and let himself be carried away by the melody, imagining the audience listening, completely absorbed. As the weeks passed, the boy's dedication began to show. His hands moved more confidently, his fingers remembered the keys without conscious thought, and his music began to feel alive. He was no longer just imagining melodies. He was creating them. Each time he left the academy, he felt a sense of accomplishment, even though no one else had heard his progress. He was learning something important, that growth often comes quietly, and that patience and persistence are just as important as talent. He also learned to deal with frustration. Sometimes he would play a piece perfectly one moment, only to stumble the next. He discovered that it was okay to make mistakes, as long as he kept trying. Every wrong note was a chance to learn, every repetition a step closer to mastery. Slowly, he started to feel proud of his efforts, knowing that he was moving forward, even if no one else noticed. One day, while practicing a particularly tricky section, he heard footsteps approaching. His heart raced, fearing the director might catch him. But it was not the director. It was one of the older students, curious about what he was doing. The boy froze, unsure if he should continue. The student watched silently for a moment, then gave a small nod of approval. "You play well," they said softly before leaving. The boy felt a spark of confidence. If someone else could recognize his talent, maybe he was truly capable. The incident gave him the courage to practice even more boldly. He experimented with dynamics, trying soft notes and loud notes, learning how to make the music express emotions. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It became his voice, a way to share his thoughts and feelings without words. At home, he began to compose small pieces of his own. They were simple at first, short melodies that expressed happiness, sadness, or hope. Each time he created something new, he felt a sense of pride and excitement. He realized that music was not only about following rules or reproducing others' work. It was about expressing himself. This realization made him even more determined to one day perform in front of others. The janitor continued to be a silent supporter, occasionally leaving small notes of encouragement or giving him tips on technique. Their quiet connection became an important part of his journey, a reminder that support and understanding could come from unexpected places. The boy began to see the academy not as a place of judgment, but as a world full of possibilities, where he could grow and learn if he dared to try. He started to notice changes in himself. He walked with more confidence, held his head higher, and even spoke more clearly to teachers and peers. Music had given him a new sense of purpose, and that energy was beginning to affect other parts of his life. He realized that determination, practice, and belief in oneself could make a difference, even when others doubted him. The boy also learned to dream bigger. He began imagining not just playing for himself or a small audience, but performing in front of the entire academy. He pictured the director, the students, and the teachers listening to his music, their expressions changing from doubt to amazement. These thoughts motivated him to work even harder, to refine his technique, and to develop his own style. Every day, the boy returned to the dusty piano, ready to face the challenges and enjoy the small victories. He learned patience, perseverance, and the joy of discovery. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he was no longer afraid. The music had become part of him, a guiding force that gave him strength and hope. As the weeks turned into months, his skills grew steadily. He could now play longer pieces without stopping. His fingers moved with confidence, and the music he created began to touch the hearts of those who accidentally heard it. The boy realized that he was no longer just a dreamer. He was a musician, learning to transform his love for music into something tangible, something that could inspire others. Even though the director had laughed at him and told him he would never perform, the boy had learned an important truth. Talent could grow anywhere if nurtured with dedication and passion. The dusty piano at the back of the academy had become a place of magic, a place where dreams could take shape, and a place where he could prepare for the moment when he would finally share his music with the world. The academy buzzed with news of an upcoming recital. Every student was expected to perform in front of the teachers, the director, and the audience that would include families and friends. The announcement filled the halls with excitement and nervous energy. For some, it was a chance to show their hard work. For others, it was a test of skill and courage. For the boy, it was a challenge that stirred both fear and determination within him. He had been practicing quietly for months in the back room, away from the eyes of anyone who might judge him. He had grown confident in his abilities, but the thought of performing in front of everyone at the academy made his stomach twist. He imagined the director's smirk, the laughter, the whispers of doubt. He thought of all the students who already seemed so skilled, who could play pieces effortlessly while he still stumbled over some of the more complex notes. And yet, despite the fear, there was a spark inside him that would not let him turn away. He decided to sign up for the recital. The thought of it terrified him, but he knew that this was his chance. His hands shook slightly as he filled out the form, but he tried to calm himself with deep breaths. The janitor, who had become a silent supporter and quiet mentor, gave him a small smile. It was the only encouragement he needed. The boy realized that fear was natural, but courage meant moving forward despite that fear. The days leading up to the recital were filled with preparation. He practiced tirelessly on the old piano in the back room, playing and replaying his pieces, perfecting the timing and the flow. Sometimes he would hit wrong notes and feel frustrated, but he refused to give up. He would pause, listen to the sound, and adjust his fingers, learning to guide the music rather than letting mistakes guide him. The music was becoming part of him, and he began to feel that he could share it with others. At the same time, he observed the other students. They practiced in the main halls, confident and skilled. Some of them noticed him watching from the shadows, but he avoided contact. He did not want anyone to see him yet. His focus was inward on the music and the story he wanted to tell through it. The director, meanwhile, seemed to pay him little attention, assuming that the boy would never reach the level of the other students. That assumption only strengthened the boy's resolve. He thought often about the moment when he would step onto the stage. He imagined the audience sitting in silence, waiting for the first notes to fill the air. His fingers hovered over the keys in his mind, and he rehearsed the motion, imagining how he would control each sound. The fear was still there, but it had transformed into a kind of energy that pushed him to practice even harder. One afternoon, while practicing a difficult passage, he made a mistake that frustrated him deeply. He slammed his hands on the keys and felt the sting of failure. But then he took a deep breath and reminded himself why he was doing this. He remembered the first time he had touched the dusty piano, the long nights of practice, the secret melodies he had created, and the quiet encouragement from the janitor. He sat down again and tried once more, this time playing the section with more control, more focus. It was not perfect, but it was progress. That was enough. As the recital approached, the boy began to experience a mix of excitement and anxiety. He could hear whispers in the hallways, students discussing their pieces, and the upcoming performances. He tried to tune it out, focusing only on the music. Every day, he played as though the recital had already begun, imagining the audience listening, imagining himself standing confidently on the stage. The director's words still haunted him, but they no longer held him back. They had become a challenge he wanted to overcome, a shadow that pushed him to prove himself. At home, he continued to practice on the small keyboard, reinforcing the movements of his fingers and memorizing the pieces. His family noticed his concentration and dedication, but they did not fully understand the depth of his ambition. They only saw the joy that music brought him, and that was enough for their support. The boy knew that true recognition would come later, from those who understood and valued his talent. Finally, the day of the recital arrived. The academy was filled with students, teachers, and families, all waiting for the performances to begin. The boy felt his heart pounding in his chest. His hands were sweaty, and his stomach twisted with nerves. He stood backstage watching the other students perform. Some played flawlessly, their music filling the room with confidence and elegance. Others stumbled, but quickly recovered, showing resilience. Each performance reminded him of the challenge ahead, but also of the possibility of success. He took a deep breath and reminded himself of the journey that had brought him here. He thought of the hours of practice in the back room, the mistakes that had taught him patience, and the small victories that had built his confidence. He thought of the janitor's quiet encouragement and the dream that had grown in his heart for so long. All of these things were his strength now. When his name was called, he stepped onto the stage, trembling slightly but determined. The spotlight was bright, and the audience was silent, waiting. He could see the director sitting in the front row, arms crossed and eyes sharp, ready to judge. The boy felt a flash of fear, but he pushed it aside. This was his moment. He had worked too hard and dreamed too long to turn back now. He sat down at the piano, his hands hovering above the keys. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath, and then began to play. At first, the notes were tentative, cautious, but gradually they grew more confident, more fluid. The melody filled the room, soft and gentle at first, then rising and falling with emotion. The boy felt the music flow through him, guiding his fingers, telling a story he had carried in his heart for so long. The audience was captivated. They leaned forward, listening intently, drawn into the world the boy was creating with his music. The director's smirk faded as he realized that this performance was not ordinary. The boy's fingers moved with skill and feeling, each note precise yet full of expression. It was clear that he had practiced tirelessly, learned from every mistake, and discovered his own voice. For the first time, the boy did not feel fear. He felt connection, a bond with the music and the people listening. He let the melody carry him, allowing the emotion to guide each movement. The room seemed to hold its breath as the final notes echoed and lingered, a quiet testament to his journey and determination. When he lifted his hands from the keys, the silence held for a moment longer. Then the audience erupted in applause. The boy's heart raced, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. He had done it. He had faced his fear, stepped onto the stage, and shared his music. The director, once so doubtful, now looked at him with a mixture of surprise and respect. The boy smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. The recital had shown him what was possible when passion, practice, and courage came together. He had discovered that even in the face of doubt and judgment, determination could lead to achievement. And though the journey was far from over, he knew that he had taken a significant step toward the dreams he had nurtured for so long. The moment had arrived. The boy sat backstage, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, feeling the weight of the spotlight that awaited him. He could hear the applause from the previous performer fading, the murmurs of the audience, and the soft shuffle of people settling into their seats. His heart pounded in his chest, and his stomach twisted with nervous energy. This was it, the moment he had dreamed of, practiced for, and imagined countless times. The stage was waiting for him, and so was the director, sitting in the front row with his sharp gaze, arms crossed and eyes filled with skepticism. The boy took a deep breath, trying to calm his trembling hands. He reminded himself of the hours he had spent at the dusty piano in the back room of the academy, the countless mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned from each one. He remembered the quiet encouragement from the janitor, the small nods of approval, and the secret smiles that had reassured him that he was on the right path. All of that had prepared him for this moment. When his name was called, he stood slowly, his legs feeling heavy as if they had a life of their own. He walked toward the stage, each step echoing slightly on the polished floor. The audience was silent, waiting to see what this boy, who had been dismissed and doubted, could possibly do. The director's smirk was unmistakable, a reminder of the words that had haunted him, "He'll never perform." The boy's hands shook slightly as he approached the piano. He paused for a moment, letting his eyes sweep over the audience, then lowered himself onto the bench. His fingers hovered over the keys, feeling their familiar texture, the small bumps and smooth surfaces that had become his guides. He took another deep breath, closing his eyes for a brief second, and reminded himself that this was his music, his story, and his moment. No one else could play it the way he could. He began slowly, pressing the keys with caution at first. The sound was tentative, unsure, but gradually it gained confidence, each note flowing into the next. The melody he had practiced countless times in the back room began to fill the hall. The boy allowed himself to feel the music, to let it guide his fingers and his emotions. He was no longer thinking about the audience, the director, or the fear that had once gripped him. He was only thinking about the music and the story it told. The audience listened in silence, drawn into the world he was creating. The melody was soft at first, like a whisper, gentle and cautious. Then it grew stronger, more expressive, reaching out and touching the hearts of everyone in the room. The boy's fingers moved with increasing confidence, each note precise yet full of emotion. The music was no longer just sound. It was a language, a message, a reflection of his journey, his struggles, and his dreams. The director's smirk slowly faded as he realized that this performance was unlike any he had expected. The boy's fingers moved with skill, his timing was flawless, and his ability to express feeling through the keys was extraordinary. The audience was captivated, leaning forward in their seats, hanging on every note. Some eyes widened in surprise, some brows lifted in admiration, and some held tears as the beauty of the music washed over them. The boy's mind was clear. He felt the rhythm and the flow, the rise and fall of the melody, and the connection between each note. He allowed himself to feel the emotions he had poured into the music. The fear, the hope, the determination, and the joy. Every mistake he had made during his secret practice sessions had led him to this moment, and now the music was perfect in its imperfection. It was alive, breathing, and speaking in a way words never could. Time seemed to stretch as he continued to play. The notes lingered, filling every corner of the hall, wrapping around the audience and pulling them into the story he was telling. The boy's fingers moved faster, then slower, then softer, then louder, as the dynamics of the music guided him. He felt a deep connection to the piano, as if it were an extension of his own body, a voice for the emotions he had kept hidden for so long. He noticed the janitor in the back, standing quietly, watching with pride. A small nod from him reassured the boy, reminding him that he had support and that his journey mattered. The boy allowed himself a small smile, feeling a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. For the first time, he realized that the music was not just about performance. It was about expression, connection, and courage. The final notes approached, and the boy poured all his emotion into them, letting the melody rise and fall one last time. He held each key, allowing the sound to resonate, lingering in the air, touching everyone who listened. When the last note faded, the silence that followed was heavy, filled with awe and wonder. The boy lifted his hands from the keys, his chest heaving, his heart pounding with a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. For a moment, no one moved. The audience held their breath, processing the beauty of what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder and louder, until it filled the entire hall. The boy looked up, surprised and overwhelmed by the sound of their approval. He had done it. He had faced his fear, stepped onto the stage, and shared his music with the world. The director, who had doubted him so openly, now sat in stunned silence. His arms were no longer crossed, his eyes wide with amazement. He could not hide the respect that had replaced his initial disbelief. The boy had proven that determination, practice, and passion could overcome doubt and judgment. The director's words, once so cutting, now seemed insignificant in the face of the boy's triumph. As the applause continued, the the boy felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had not just played the piano. He had told his story, shared his journey, and shown that even those who are underestimated can achieve greatness. He had transformed fear into courage, doubt into determination, and dreams into reality. The music had done what words could not. It had spoken for him, reaching the hearts of everyone who listened. After the performance, the boy stood and bowed, feeling the warmth of the audience's admiration. He looked at the director, who finally offered a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the boy's talent and effort. It was not a word of praise, but it was enough. The boy realized that recognition did not always need to come in the form of compliments. Sometimes, it came in the quiet understanding of those who had once doubted. He stepped off the stage, feeling lighter than he had ever felt before. The fear that had once held him back had melted away, replaced by confidence and a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that this was only the beginning of his journey, that there would be more challenges ahead, but he also knew that he had the strength to face them. The music had taught him resilience, patience, and the power of belief. The boy returned to the dusty piano in the back room after the recital, playing quietly for himself. He experimented with new melodies, exploring the depths of his creativity, and finding joy in the simple act of making music. He had learned that performance was not only about showing others. It was about discovering oneself, finding one's voice, and sharing it with courage and honesty. From that day forward, the boy continued to practice, learn, and grow. He no longer feared the director's judgment or the doubts of others. He had proven to himself that his dreams were valid, that his talent was real, and that with determination and passion, he could overcome any obstacle. The stage had been a place of challenge, but it had also been a place of triumph, a turning point that would shape the rest of his life. The boy knew that the journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new audiences, and new pieces of music to master. But he faced them with a heart full of courage, hands ready to play, and a spirit that had been tested and strengthened. He had touched the piano and, in doing so, had touched the hearts of everyone who listened. And in that moment, he realized the truth. Talent, perseverance, and passion could break through even the strongest barriers, and the world would listen when one dared to believe in oneself. The boy had stepped off the stage after his first performance, but the echoes of the music still lingered in the hall and in his mind. The applause had been overwhelming, but more than that, he felt a sense of connection with everyone who had listened. For the first time, he understood what it meant to touch hearts with music. It was not just about playing the right notes. It was about letting the emotion flow through every key, every pause, every subtle change in rhythm. As he walked through the hallways of the academy, he noticed students and teachers alike looking at him differently. Some smiled, some whispered to each other, and some simply nodded with admiration. The boy could feel the change in the air. He had stepped out of the shadows, and though the journey was far from over, he had made a mark. He carried himself with a new confidence, but it was a quiet confidence, grounded in the work he had done and the courage he had shown. The director, who had once doubted him so openly, now approached. His face was serious, but there was a hint of respect in his eyes. "You have improved," the director said quietly. "That performance, it was more than I expected." The boy felt a rush of emotion but held himself steady. He nodded respectfully, understanding that recognition sometimes came in small words, not grand gestures. In the days following the recital, the boy's life began to change in subtle ways. He was no longer invisible in the academy. Other students began to notice his dedication and skill. Some even approached him for tips or to discuss music. The boy was shy at first, unsure how to respond, but he soon realized that he could share what he had learned. He began to feel a sense of community, a feeling that he was part of something bigger than himself. He continued to practice every day, no longer in secret, but openly and with purpose. The dusty piano in the back room remained his favorite place to play, but he also spent time in the main halls, playing in front of others who wanted to learn. He discovered a new joy in teaching, in helping others find their own connection to music. It was a reminder that talent was not just about personal success, but also about sharing, inspiring, and lifting others along the way. One afternoon, the Academy announced a special showcase for students who had demonstrated exceptional growth. The boy's name was on the list. This time, he would not be nervous. He felt ready, prepared, and excited. He knew that the audience would listen, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. He remembered the first time he had touched the dusty piano and how far he had come. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but it had also been rewarding beyond measure. The showcase began, and the boy walked onto the stage, the bright lights warming his face. The audience was large, including families, teachers, and students from other schools. The director sat in the front row watching closely. The boy took a deep breath, let his hands hover over the keys for a brief moment, and then began to play. From the first note, it was clear that this performance would be extraordinary. His fingers moved with precision and fluidity, each note resonating with emotion. The melody rose and fell, telling a story of struggle, hope, and triumph. The audience was captivated, leaning forward, hanging on every sound. The boy played with a confidence and passion that seemed to fill the entire room, leaving no space untouched by the music. He played a piece he had composed himself, a reflection of his journey. It was a combination of all the lessons he had learned, the mistakes he had corrected, and the emotions he had felt along the way. The music spoke of fear transformed into courage, doubt transformed into determination, and dreams realized through persistence. Every note carried his story, and the audience could feel it. The director watched in silence, his expression shifting from surprise to admiration. He had underestimated the boy before, but now he could see the truth. Talent was not always immediate, and greatness often grew quietly, nurtured by dedication, passion, and perseverance. The boy had proven that the journey mattered as much as the destination, and that anyone who dared to follow their dream could achieve something remarkable. As the final notes echoed through the hall, the silence held for a heartbeat before the applause erupted. The audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the beauty and emotion of the music. The boy stood, bowing deeply, his heart full of gratitude and joy. He had not only played the piano, he had shared his soul with everyone who listened. After the performance, students and teachers approached him, offering words of praise and encouragement. Some asked about his practice methods, some wanted to know about his compositions, and others simply wanted to express how inspired they felt. The boy realized that his music had created a ripple effect, touching lives in ways he had never imagined. The director finally approached him, a small smile breaking across his face. "You have a gift," he said. "Do not let anyone, including yourself, doubt it again." The boy nodded, feeling a sense of validation, but also understanding that the real reward was not in the praise, but in the ability to express himself and connect with others through music. The boy's journey continued beyond that day. He kept practicing, composing, and performing, always striving to improve, but always remembering the joy that had brought him to the piano in the first place. He learned that music was not just about skill, but about heart, patience, and the courage to share one's true self. He also learned to inspire others. He encouraged students who struggled, offering guidance and empathy, showing them that perseverance could overcome doubt. He shared the story of his journey, the secret hours of practice, the mistakes that became lessons, and the moment when he had finally performed. His story became a beacon of hope for those who felt overlooked or underestimated. Through music, the boy discovered his identity and his purpose. He realized that talent was only part of the equation. Determination, hard work, and a willingness to face fear were just as important. He had transformed from a boy who was doubted and dismissed into a young musician whose courage and passion could not be ignored. The academy itself began to change. The atmosphere became more supportive, recognizing that students grew at different paces and that encouragement could unlock hidden potential. The boy's journey became a reminder to everyone that greatness often appears quietly, nurtured by dedication and belief, waiting for the right moment to shine. In the end, the boy understood that the journey mattered more than the applause, more than recognition, and even more than the performance itself. Music had given him courage, confidence, and connection. It had transformed his life, shaped his character, and opened doors he had never imagined. The boy continued to play, creating new melodies, exploring new emotions, and sharing his music with everyone willing to listen. The piano became an extension of his voice, a tool through which he could express his deepest thoughts and feelings. Each note was a testament to his perseverance, a reflection of his journey, and a promise that no dream was too distant if one dared to pursue it with heart and determination. The boy had come a long way from the shy, quiet child who first dreamed of touching the piano. The academy, once a place of fear and doubt, had become a world full of opportunities and challenges that he could now face with confidence. Every day he returned to the dusty piano in the back room, but now he played not just for himself, but for anyone who wanted to listen, and sometimes for no one at all, simply to feel the music flow through him. After the showcase, the boy became known throughout the academy. Students who had once ignored him now asked for guidance, curious about his methods and inspired by his determination. Teachers started using his story to motivate others, emphasizing that progress came from perseverance and belief, not just natural talent. The boy, once invisible, had become a symbol of hope and inspiration. He continued to compose his own pieces, each reflecting different emotions, experiences, and dreams. Some were joyful and light, others melancholic, and a few carried the intensity of challenges he had faced and overcome. Each composition was a step in his journey, a way to express himself and to communicate with the world. People began to notice the depth and maturity in his music, recognizing that it came not only from skill but from a genuine connection to his heart. The director, who had once laughed and doubted him, became one of his quiet admirers. Though the director was not known for openly praising students, he began to offer subtle guidance, suggesting techniques and pieces to challenge the boy further. The relationship was never about flattery. It was about respect earned through effort, resilience, and undeniable talent. The boy understood this and appreciated the acknowledgement, knowing that real recognition often came silently. As the boy's reputation grew, opportunities arose to perform outside the academy. He was invited to small community events, local concerts, and even charity functions. Each performance was a new challenge, a new chance to connect with people through music. The nerves he once felt before performing still appeared, but he had learned to channel them into focus and expression. The stage no longer felt intimidating. It had become a place where he could speak without words. Even as he gained recognition, the boy remained humble. He remembered the long hours of practice in the back room, the mistakes that had taught him patience, and the quiet encouragement from the janitor that had sparked his belief in himself. He knew that talent alone was not enough. It was dedication, resilience, and a willingness to keep learning that had brought him this far. He continued to practice daily, refining his skills, exploring new styles, and challenging himself to grow. One day, while practicing a new piece, he noticed a younger student peeking into the back room. The boy remembered how it felt to be shy and uncertain, to dream quietly in a corner while others seemed so confident. He smiled and gestured for the student to come in. Together, they sat at the piano, and the boy began to teach, sharing not just techniques but encouragement, patience, and the joy of music. He realized that part of his journey was now about lifting others, helping them find their own voices. The boy's story spread throughout the community. People marveled at how a child who had been dismissed and doubted could rise to such skill and confidence. Local newspapers featured articles about his performances, emphasizing his dedication and the inspiration he provided to others. Teachers from other schools began inviting him to workshops and masterclasses, eager to learn from his approach and his philosophy that music was about heart as much as hands. Despite the growing attention, the boy never lost sight of why he played. The music itself remained his true passion. Every note, every pause, every melody was a way to express his feelings, to reflect on his experiences, and to connect with those around him. He understood that music had the power to inspire, heal, and unite, and he embraced that responsibility with humility and joy. The boy also faced new challenges. Each performance and opportunity brought new pressures and expectations. He learned to manage these with the same patience and perseverance that had carried him through his early days. Mistakes still happened, nerves still appeared, but he had learned to view them as part of the journey rather than obstacles. Every performance, whether perfect or flawed, was a lesson, a chance to grow, and a way to communicate his story. He continued to compose original music, experimenting with different emotions and techniques. Some compositions were bold and dramatic, others soft and introspective. Each piece carried a part of him, a reflection of his journey, and a message for those who listened. His music became a bridge between his inner world and the outside, a way to express what words often could not. Over time, the boy realized that the impact of his journey extended beyond the academy or the stage. He had become an example of resilience, patience, and the power of belief. Children who had once doubted themselves began to see what was possible if they pursued their passions with dedication. Teachers used his story to encourage others, emphasizing that growth comes in its own time and that talent is only one part of the equation. The boy's life was transformed, not only by his skill on the piano but by the lessons he had learned along the way. He understood the importance of perseverance, the value of encouragement, and the strength that comes from facing fear. He had learned to turn doubt into motivation, mistakes into lessons, and dreams into reality. The journey had shaped him, not just as a musician, but as a person. The academy, once a place of intimidation, had become a community where talent, dedication, and heart were recognized. The boy's journey inspired not only students but teachers, families, and the wider community. His story was a reminder that belief in oneself, combined with persistent effort and a love for what one does, could overcome even the harshest doubts. Years later, the boy, now a young man, continued to play and compose, carrying the lessons of his journey into each new piece. He performed for audiences large and small, always remembering the days when he practiced in secret, uncertain of his place in the world. He shared his story with aspiring musicians, encouraging them to believe in themselves, work hard, and let their hearts guide their hands. He knew that the director's laughter, once a source of pain, had been a catalyst. It had challenged him to prove himself, to discover his own strength, and to embrace the journey fully. The boy had transformed doubt into triumph, fear into courage, and dreams into reality. Every note he played was a testament to his perseverance and a celebration of the power of belief. Through it all, the piano remained his faithful companion. It was more than an instrument. It was a friend, a teacher, and a bridge to the world. It had witnessed his struggles, his growth, and his triumphs. And as long as the boy played, the music would continue to tell his story, inspiring others and reminding them that with heart, courage, and dedication, anything was possible.